On Thanksgiving Day, my sister gave me a paper plate and said, "Your place is in the garage." I stood there holding a plate, my 2 children nestled behind me, and the whole family sat eating in the warm yellow light, and I was pushed out as if I didn't exist. But that moment of exclusion became the turning point in my life. This isn't just a story about vulnerability. It's about how one woman turned humiliation into strength. If you've ever been looked down upon, pushed away from the party table, stay. Because of this ending, no one could have predicted it. Thanksgiving that year was colder than usual, but nothing made me numb more than my sister's words when she pointed towards the garage and said, "She's used to eating leftovers. Don't whisper, don't blink." He simply gave me a paper plate, turned around and walked into the perfect dining room, where everyone in the family was seated under the golden lights and sparkling chandeliers. I stood there holding a fragile plate, my 2 children. Micah is 12 years old and Ela is 9 years old, standing behind silent. No one asked, no one cried. They just looked at me, waiting to see what I would do next. I can't cry. Not possible, not in front of the kids, not after all we've been through together. So I smile. I took their hands and led them through the side door into the garage. The smell of gasoline, the smell of dust, not a single greeting. There was only a folding table against the wall, 2 metal chairs, and an old cardboard box to sit on. No decoration, no tablecloths, not warm at all. Just the dry, metallic sound of a fork hitting a cheap plastic plate. We had Thanksgiving dinner there, like 3 people whose names no one remembers. Micah didn't say anything, just held his fork tightly, as if he was suppressing an anger that had nowhere to escape. Isla pushed the sweet potato cake around the plate quietly. I looked at them, really looked, and what I felt at that moment was neither anger nor hurt. It was a transformative moment. I suddenly realized I was done with trying to be accepted. And then the unexpected happened. A black limousine, shiny quiet, slowly rolled in front of the house. It's not anyone's relative's car, not a guest of Veronica's husband, Blake. A real limo with a uniformed white-gloved driver, professional every step of the way. I could see figures inside the house through the curtains, heads turning, footsteps hurrying toward the front door. But the limo didn't stop there. It goes around to the garage, engine off. The back door opened. A woman stepped out, tall, graceful, in an elegant navy blue coat that I guessed cost half my month's salary. She looked around, then asked clear as day, "I'm looking for this homeowner." And when I stood up, I saw their faces through the window, all of them stand frozen. Before I could react, my daughter Isla squeezed my hand tighter. Micah stood up from the old folding chair, his back straightened suddenly as if his body was trying to protect me without knowing what was coming. That woman was not shy, nor did she back down when I opened the garage door only halfway. The wind blew in cold, but she did not flinch. On the contrary, she smiled. "Sorry for the disturbance," she said in a warm and calm voice, as if asking for directions in a quiet bookstore. "I'm looking for Callie Rivers." My heart skipped a beat. "I'm Callie," I replied, somewhat confused. "My sister owns this house. She's staying inside." The woman tilted her head. Her eyes were not glued to the luxurious house behind me, but still looked straight at me as if everything else no longer existed. "No, I came to see you." I was stunned. For a few seconds, the whole world went silent. Micah frowned. Isla looked at me curiously. I stammered, Do I know you?" This time her smile carried something familiar, a warm glimmer of old memories. "My name is Margot Ellington. I'm the founder of Women Forward. 5 years ago I volunteered at a women's centre, and then I wrote a series of blog posts. Honest, insightful, unforgettable." I gasped. A blurry memory suddenly woke up like a light turning on after a long power outage. That was the time when I had just left my husband and lived together with my children in my best friend's apartment. On tired nights, I went to the refugee centre as a volunteer, trying to cling to some sense amid the chaos. I wrote about the women I met, not to attract attention, but to keep myself awake. I've been following your posts ever since she continued. She has a way of making people feel seen, and we need that more than ever. I was speechless. Margot remained calm. We're holding a national conference next spring, and I'd like you to be the opening speaker. We'll take care of everything: travel, lodging, babysitting if you need it. Also, we'd like to offer you a publishing contract for your story. I heard my own gasp. Isla looked at me like I was a superhero. Micah barely blinked. I don't know whether to cry or laugh. Over the years, I've tried to keep to myself, trying not to become a burden. And then in the middle of the cold holiday season, a woman stepped out of a limousine, stood in the middle of this messy garage, and said to me, "Your voice has value and the world needs to hear it." I just nodded, not believing I was living in reality. "I would be honoured," I said, my voice still shaking slightly. Margot said nothing more. She just reached out, not in a saving way. It's the way of holding out a hand, like someone giving someone a worthy position, a respect that has long been lacking. I took her hand. For the first time in many years, I felt myself standing a little straighter. Not out of pride, but because finally someone really saw me. Micah picked up the box of leftovers as if it were treasure. Ela grabbed my hand again. This time there was no fear, just pure excitement. We walked out of the garage with Margot. The cold wind hit our faces, but didn't make anyone shiver. Something inside me warmed, as if today was no longer a disappointing Thanksgiving, but the starting point for something completely new. The limousine rolled out of the driveway, the pale yellow light inside gently embracing me. The soft leather chairs and thick glass doors cut out the sound of the wind, the sharp laughter behind them and the sound of dishes clashing from that cold dining room. A quiet moment I don't know how long I've been craving for. I sat there next to my daughter across from Micah, my hands still cold from the evening outside in the garage. But inside, it seems to be getting warmer. Margot talked to the driver through a small window, then turned back to me, her gaze still as calm as when she entered the garage. "We have a table downtown tonight," she said. "I want to discuss more about the conference, about the book manuscript, and about what you need in the next few months to actually have time to write." I nodded, unable to believe I was sitting here in a space that only appeared in movies or novels. "Sounds like a dream," I whispered. Margot tilted her head, smiling. "No. This is a reality that you should have entered a long time ago." Ela whispered in my ear, her voice enchanting. "Mom, is this what it feels like? To be famous?" I laughed, not loudly, just enough for the laughter to melt away the tension that had been buried in my heart for so long. "No, honey," I said, looking at her deeply. "This is what it feels like, to be respected." Micah said nothing. The boy was still observing, his eyes more mature than his age. But I realized, for the first time in many months, he sat leaning back in the chair, no longer holding his body tense as if ready to shield me. It saw that I was strong enough to stand. We arrived at the restaurant about 20 minutes later. A luxurious place, but not too ostentatious. Yellow light, white tablecloth, fireplace peeking out from the corner of the wall. When the waiter pulled out a chair for me, calling me Mom with a serious look as if I was someone truly important, I almost choked up, not because of the way they serve, but because I feel I deserve to be treated that way. Not because I'm someone special, but because all these years I've lived as if my presence was always a burden. We had dinner in an atmosphere filled with a feeling of being understood. Margot asked me about my journey as a single mother, about juggling my day job as a receptionist and writing late at night. I talk about the nights I stayed up until 2 a.m, my eyes stinging from the laptop screen but still trying to edit every word. I talked about the time Micah tried to pay the rent when he heard his mother crying in the kitchen, or the times Isla insisted on putting coloured stickers on my resume as if turning the job search into a game. Margot did not interrupt. She just nodded, listened, noted the smallest things. I have never been listened to like that. Not because of my family, not because of my ex-husband, not because society is used to looking at people like me with pity instead of recognition. When the bill was brought, Margot just waved her hand lightly. "You've already paid in full. We'll take care of it from now on." I don't answer. That sentence, simple but like untying a knot in my heart, I don't know how long I struggled. I don't know when I got used to trying but not getting anything in return. But at that moment, I let go, and I feel light. On the way home, no one said much. It's not because we're speechless, but for peace there is no need to be noisy. When I bent down to cover Isla with the blanket, she pulled my hand back. "I'm glad they let us eat in the garage," he whispered. I blinked, not sure I heard right. "Really?" The child nodded. "Because otherwise, how would that car know where to find Mum? I can't say anything. I just looked at her for a long time. And I know, she's right. Sometimes we are pushed to the edge, not because we don't deserve it, but because there is something better waiting. But we can't get in if we're still sitting in the same place." I sat in the dark living room after my child fell asleep without turning on the lights, just letting the light from the kitchen shine gently. The 2-room apartment was as small as ever, but for the first time it didn't make me feel deprived. It's just enough, just warm enough, just quiet enough, just enough to start again. I'm still not used to anxiety-free silence. On previous nights, the silence was always accompanied by the overwhelming sound of thoughts, rent, school uniforms for children, electricity bills. But that night I only heard the clock ticking and the wind passing through the old window. And I sat there, my arms wrapped around my cold tea, thinking about the woman in the navy blue jacket who had gotten out of her car and walked right into my life, as if she had always been there, just waiting for me to be ready to take a decent chance. From that day, everything started to change. Not fast, noiseless, but definitely. The first email came just 2 days later from Margot's assistant, a detailed schedule for the conference, a book manuscript contract document, and a short message. "We believe in you." I read that line over and over again as if afraid my eyes were deceiving me. Not hope for you. Not she has potential, which is we believe. How long has it been since I heard someone say that to me? I started rewriting what used to just sit in drafts that were never posted. Diary passages from my first year as a single mother. The stories I was once embarrassed to tell are now the guts of a book. It's not because I want to be called an author, but because I don't want others who feel invisible to continue to think they are alone. Micah started being quieter from that day on, but not in a cold way. The boy watched as if trying to note every change in my behaviour. One day when I closed my laptop after a long writing session, it handed me a piece of paper, a poem. 4 short stanzas. The handwriting is still clumsy, but the first line made me dumbfounded. "Chairs don't make the table." I don't cry, but my throat felt tight as if someone was gently squeezing me from inside. That's how he processes emotions, with words. And I understand, it's learning from me. As for Isla, she started asking about crayons and drawing paper and wanted to make a nameplate, "Mom is the author," to hang in the kitchen. I don't stop you. I let my children be as creative as they want. In his eyes, I am no longer the mother who is always tired from working overtime, but a woman who has just been seen by the world after so many years of silence. One afternoon, as I passed the mirror in the hallway, I caught a glimpse of myself. It's not about neater hair or neater clothes. It's the eyes. It is no longer avoided. No more trying to make it smaller to fit into someone's space. For the first time, I saw myself and didn't feel the need to apologize for my presence. The call from the publisher came on a Tuesday morning. The editor said they wanted to name the book More Than Scraps. I was silent for a few seconds. Immediately, the image of a paper plate on Thanksgiving appeared in my mind. The slices of ham, the plastic spoon, Micah's eyes, Ila's whisper. asking, "Did we do something wrong?" I don't need to ask why they chose that name. I just replied, "That's the perfect name." I didn't tell my mother, nor did I text Veronica anything, not because of anger, but because I no longer need congratulations from the place that once extinguished me every time I had a glimmer of hope. I don't want to prove anything to them anymore. All the proof I need is living with me, sitting at my dinner table, growing every day. That evening we sat down to eat together. No high chairs, no silver plates, just simple pasta water and laughter. Isla suddenly asked, "Mom, can we celebrate Thanksgiving at our house this year?" I looked at my child in surprise. "Who do you want to invite?" He thought for a moment and then answered, "Just a few people, someone who makes me feel warm, someone who never lets me sit in the garage." Micah nodded. "No need for a long table, just sit close together." I smiled, didn't answer, just stood up to get another spoon for dessert. Knowing in our hearts this year, we will do it our way, not to replace what was lost, but to confirm what finally comes, intimacy without permission. The backstage was strangely quiet. The dispatcher whispered something to me, but I couldn't hear it clearly. It's not because I'm worried, but because my heart is beating in a very different rhythm, slow but heavy, as if the buried years are slowly rising to the surface, demanding to be recounted. I hold the microphone. The fingers are cold, but the heart is not. The red velvet curtain blocking the stage lights slowly opened, and I walked out, no longer the woman standing in the corner of the garage, waiting for someone to invite her to the dinner table. It's a woman who knows she doesn't need to be invited anymore. Light poured down. Below are the faces, so many, women in suits, single mothers, students, people with grey hair. I don't know who they are, but I know they understand. I started telling, not in the voice of a speaker, but in my own voice, a person who used to write a blog at 2 a.m, with the sound of a fan louder than the sound of typing. I talk about the garage, about the folding table, about cold sweet potatoes and the saying, "You're used to eating leftovers, right?" No one laughed. No one turned away. They were silent, as if they were sitting in that same garage with me. I talk about my daughter's eyes when she asked, "What did I do wrong?" And I said, my voice starting to crack, "We didn't do anything wrong, we were just misplaced." Then I stopped for a moment. It's not because I forgot the words, but because I see something I have never seen in the past 10 years. I have weight, not in the way people measure it by money or status, but with the truth. I continue to tell about the woman in the blue coat who stepped down from the limousine, not to offer compassion, but to extend her hand like someone who sees value where others turn their backs. I talk about dinner that night, not a lavish feast, but the first time I sat at the table and didn't feel the need to cower. And then I looked down at the front row, where Margot was sitting next to Micah and Isla. They were both wearing neat shirts, but it was the eyes that made me want to cry. The eyes of two children who once felt unchosen, now looking at their mother with absolute trust. I close with a very simple sentence. I thought if I tried hard enough, good enough, someone would pull me to the family table. But no one pulled. So I made my own table. And now if you're lost, shaking, thinking you're just worth eating leftovers, know that you're not alone. Because there's a place for you, right here, right at this table. The applause did not come immediately. There was a very long silence, but I like that, because it's real, because it tells me people don't just listen, they are feeling cold. And then applause arose, not massively, not flamboyantly, but evenly, steady. A few people stood up, then more, then the auditorium. I don't laugh, I just took a deep breath. And in that moment, I wasn't thinking about Veronica or my mother or Blake. I just thought of Isla asking if I hadn't been pushed out, would that car have found me? And I knew she was right. I don't need to be forgiven. I don't need them to regret it. I just need to know. I made it all the way from the garage to this stage with no one else but myself. And if someone, just one person, hears this story and gets up from their own dark corner, then all my pain was completely worth it. I don't remember exactly how that first morning after the conference went. Just remember the sunlight shining through the kitchen window like every day, so normal that no one thought my life had just changed. But something inside me was quietly different. It was as if I was no longer struggling to live, but actually living. Emails arrived more regularly, invitation for interview, an invitation to cooperate. Messages from strangers thanking me just for my story made them feel like they were no longer invisible. I don't answer them all, but I read each one. Each message is like a small piece of mirror reflecting parts of my life that I thought only I knew. One day I came across a comment, "I don't cry because Callie is sad, I cry because Callie is real." I sat silently in front of the screen for a long time. Just one line. But it reminds me living authentically is the bravest thing I've ever done. The book was published 3 months later. More Than Scraps. Title in bold, my name below, not hidden among anyone else. The book cover is simple, just an image of an empty paper plate placed on an old wooden table. But I know it's more than what people see. I didn't have a launch party. I didn't call to inform my mother or sister. I just gave Micah and Isla one book each, placing it neatly on the dining table. Micah flipped a few pages, then placed his hand on the cover, pensive, like someone embracing something sacred. Isla smiled widely and asked, "Mom, can you write another book? I have an idea." I nodded. Sure. That night I made hot chocolate, the 3 of us curled up in a big blanket, reading our own books out loud, as if we were telling a bedtime story. There was a passage I didn't dare read, the passage about shame, about the first time I felt left behind by my family. But Micah read it for me. It doesn't change the wording. Don't avoid any sentences. It reads slowly and clearly, as if saying for me the things I once dared not say. And I realized I was also healing my child. We started setting up little traditions. Every weekend, the whole family writes 5 things I'm proud of myself this week and sticks it on the refrigerator. One day Isla wrote, "I'm proud of myself because I didn't laugh when my friend tripped and fell." Micah wrote, "I'm proud because I can cook instant noodles without spilling." I wrote, "I'm proud because I'm no longer afraid of being turned away by someone." On Thanksgiving that year, we didn't drive to anyone's house. We are at our house. Present simple dishes on an old table that my parents often use to fold laundry. There are no tablecloths, there are no chandeliers. There were only scented candles, the smell of grilled chicken, and a few pillows spread throughout the living room. I invited a few friends, my colleague at the clinic, my neighbour downstairs, a single mother I knew at the support centre. No one has to sit alone. No one needs to eat with a paper plate. Isla placed a small paper board in front of the table, scribbled the words, "Everyone has a place. I don't correct spelling. I left it as it was because I knew that day we did the most important thing, turning an ordinary apartment into a place to truly have a family." My mother didn't call. My sister didn't text. There was only one text message from my mother early the next morning. "I hope you're okay. Sometimes I miss you too." I looked at the text. It didn't hurt like before. I just quietly texted back, "We're fine. I hope Mum is too." No complaints. Don't expect a response. It's just closing one door to open another door, the door of life that I have personally chosen, again rebuilt and preserved. Every time someone asks me, "How do you feel when your family treats you like that?" I no longer feel uncomfortable. I just laughed and replied, "Oh, my family never really did that. They just haven't found me yet, and I've found myself." It's been almost a year since that night in the garage. But there are moments that don't need a calendar to measure. It's measured by how you see the world afterward, by the way you walk without bowing your head, by not asking permission anymore to be present. I still live in the old apartment, still working at the clinic, still taking a few odd writing jobs. No miracles happened like in the movies. There was no bank account number, no one ran to publicly apologize. But what's changed is that I'm no longer waiting for those things. I don't need recognition to know I'm worthy. I sat at my own table, and that table doesn't need anyone's permission to have value. Micah still kept the small notebook, occasionally giving me a few pages to read. There is a passage where the boy wrote, "People can take the chair away from you, but they can't take you away from the table." I read, then sat quietly. My son, the one who used to quietly clasp his hands for fear of his mother breaking him, is now writing the words of a person who understands that self-respect is not something someone gives, but something we keep. As for Isla, she often asks, "Mom, will we celebrate Thanksgiving at our house again this year?" I nodded as if I had no other choice. We don't do it to compete with anyone. We just do it so we never have to eat in the garage again. Not because of the table, but because of the feeling of sitting together. Occasionally I look back at the past and wonder, if I had spoken up that day, if I had reacted, would things have been different? Maybe. But maybe not. Because I understand what makes me stronger is not when I get angry, but when I stand up. When I didn't enter the fight to reclaim my seat, but built a new table myself, right where people had forgotten me. I used to think I was redundant, Now I know I was just standing in the wrong light. And when someone, a stranger, a child, or yourself, looks at you and says, "I see you," that's enough. You don't need the whole world to see. Just need one person. And that person sometimes is yourself. So if you've ever eaten in your garage, whether for real or in your lap, hear me say this. You're not leftovers. You are not the missing part. You are the main part. You deserve to be at the table, no invitation needed. And if they don't have room for you, then build your own table. Trust me. Nice people will come around. They always are. They just need to know where the light is so they can step forward. If this story makes you pause for a moment, if it brings back something you've never said out loud, then I hope you know you're not alone. Tell your story, even though it started in the dark. Even though it doesn't have a happy ending. Because the truth always has a place and there are always people who need it. If you've been waiting for a sign that it's time to get out of the garage, here it is. I'm Callie. I used to get pushed out. But I'm back, not for acceptance, but to remind others that we don't have to wait anymore. We step into the light ourselves. And if you're on that journey too, comment to let me know where you're at. I read it all. I'm here. And I believe one day people will also ask you, "Who are you?" And you will smile and say, "I am who I am." In the end, it's enough. It's been almost a year since that night in the garage. But there are moments that don't need a calendar to measure. It's measured by how you see the world afterward. By the way you walk without bowing your head. By not asking permission anymore to be present. I still live in the old apartment. Still working at the clinic, still taking a few odd writing jobs. No miracles happened like in the movies. There was no bank account number, no one ran to publicly apologize. But what's changed is that I'm no longer waiting for those things. I don't need recognition to know I'm worthy. I sat at my own table, and that table doesn't need anyone's permission to have value. Micah still kept the small notebook, occasionally giving me a few pages to read. There is a passage where the boy wrote, "People can take the chair away from you, but they can't take you away from the table." I read, then sat quietly. My son, the one who used to quietly clasp his hands for fear of his mother breaking him, is now writing the words of a person who understands that self-respect is not something someone gives, but something we keep. As for Isla, she often asks, "Mom, will we celebrate Thanksgiving at our house again this year?" I nodded as if I had no other choice. We don't do it to compete with anyone. We just do it so we never have to eat in the garage again. Not because of the table, but because of the feeling of sitting together. Occasionally I look back at the past and wonder if I had spoken up that day, if I had reacted, would things have been different? Maybe, but maybe not. Because I understand what makes me stronger is not when I get angry, but when I stand up. When I didn't enter the fight to reclaim my seat, but built a new table myself, right where people had forgotten me. I used to think I was redundant. Now I know I was just standing in the wrong light. And when someone, a stranger, a child, or yourself, looks at you and says, "I see you," that's enough. You don't need the whole world to see. Just need one person. And that person sometimes is yourself. So if you've ever eaten in your garage, whether for real or in your lap, hear me say this, you're not leftovers. You are not the missing part. You are the main part. You deserve to be at the table, no invitation needed. And if they don't have room for you, then build your own table. Trust me, nice people will come around. They always are. They just need to know where the light is so they can step forward. If this story makes you pause for a moment, if it brings back something you've never said out loud, then I hope you know you're not alone. Tell your story, even though it started in the dark, even though it doesn't have a happy ending, because the truth always has a place and there are always people who need it. If you've been waiting for a sign that it's time to get out of the garage, here it is. I'm Callie. I used to get pushed out, but I'm back. Not for acceptance, but to remind others that we don't have to wait anymore. We step into the light ourselves. If you too have had a garage moment, don't keep it to yourself. Please share your story in the comments section. I read every word. And if you see yourself in what I tell you, if you need more gentle reminders that you are valuable, please press the channel subscription button. This is a place for those who have been forgotten. Don't forget to like the video if you find it touching. And send this video to someone you believe needs to hear it today. We tell real stories. And who knows, the next story will be yours.